Finally, we meet.
Yes, no kidding.
I've been enjoying your project
Oh
and
yeah.
the series. Oh yeah, it's a treasure. Really, it's a treasure trove.
So what
I wonder,
interviews did you find particularly interesting, or did you align with?
I really enjoyed Marianne Williamson, and especially how she's really willing to look at the journey. And so she goes into political campaign and says, "Hey, I learned something from that. I didn't know that I needed to do certain things." And I thought it was really interesting what she said about one party really trains candidates and another one could do a better job of that. So she really is, that's central to what tensegrity is about. So it was really interesting for me. Just that she's claiming her experience and the knowledge and not trying to externalize it and say, oh, it was, because of this, people weren't friendly or that didn't happen. It's like, hey, I didn't realize that I needed to do some more of this myself directly,
Yeah, and it's interesting to see people from that perspective trying to bring it into such a world as politics. I mean, that whole world just seems to be a world with its own set of rules that don't really have much to do with direct truth.
Yeah, well, and we could get into what is truth also. Yeah, direct truth. I don't think that was an ending with Marianne Williamson. I have a feeling it was a beginning. She said, even if I'm not the candidate,
Right.
I'm going to support other candidates. And it just was a beginning of a new, to me, that's a new time. When you have someone like that who's running for office. She was really close. I would have, I could have had the pleasure to vote for her, but she's one district away from my voter registration. But I saw, locally that campaign, and it was very exciting. I really enjoyed Bruce Lipton also. Just his absolute joy about what he's sharing, and also there's so much richness, and our biology is such a vast, intelligent,
Right.
and mystery also, and the biology of belief. I mean, it's really so much in there. I almost can't really summarize it for you.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Like I was saying, it's interesting that all these people from different perspectives, whether it's a biologist, a scientist, a politician, even though she's not necessarily a politician, they're pointing their light into all these different areas and bringing it to a more expansive, from my point of view, a more expansive idea of what it is, whether it's biology or socialism, social, whatever politics is.
Yeah, and I think that's really, if we look at what the opportunities in our day and age, our time,
Mhm.
it's that kind of convergence that I think is going to really make the difference
Right.
for human beings. It's like, can we integrate diversity? And that's what you're really showcasing. I think it's really exciting.
Actually, I'll ask you one more person. If you saw Jose Luis Parise, did you see his interview?
I saw a bit of it. And I saw you guys were talking about the ego and shamanism, and he's a psychotherapist, of course, so he's going to have a different thing. That was interesting, though. I mean, I could say something about that now for you if you want. I mean, first, Carlos, we really weren't talking so much about the ego. I thought it was interesting that he was saying that there's this warrior's way, and it needs to be clarified. We're at war against what?
Right.
And he, says the ego, and I'm like, that's very interesting, and I think there's some truth to that. For me, where we have to be careful, and he said it also, is if you start battling something, it's going to get bigger. And then the other issue is, for us, what is the ego? And he's got all the training to talk about that. Carlos would talk about the self, and he would talk about the me mind, and there's a little me and a bigger me. And so the self is really, Don Juan would say the self is at the core of everything that's rotten in human beings and everything that's sublime. So if we're not trying to get rid of the self, I think he said that too. I agree with him. We're not trying to get rid of an identity. We're just trying to get some other options and get around it. If you don't have any sense of self, how are you're not going to be able to show up to work or feed yourself, take care of yourself and take care of this vehicle and do anything for anybody if there's no sense of self. There has to be some passion about what you're doing, all that stuff. That's what was enjoyable about Bruce Lipton also, now that we're getting into it, is the way he was engaging with that. And he had that eureka moment. Marianne was saying, "No, I don't know. I don't go for the eureka moment." And that's really great. There's a spectrum of different experiences where we start to become aware of something that's bigger than us.
Right.
And so for me, it's been in stages. There's been different stages where it opens more. So that's the privilege if you get to follow a path. Is that
you go through the story. You go through the linear story and all the things that happen in that story,
and the nonlinear story too.
Right.
How that you got the wheel of time as a description that the seers of Don Juan's line gave to time and experience. So you'll find yourself maybe spiraling through certain things. Oh, this is another turn, and wherever you are seems like it's infinite, because in that realm it goes on forever. But if you can shift to another layer of that wheel, that always has been and will be, and so on and so forth. That's infinite too. So,
well, let's get started, and we'll cover all these things in a more in a more direct fashion, perhaps. So, the first question, as you may have guessed, is how would you describe the state of the world today?
The state of the world. In order to describe that, I want to talk about fear, and I'm going to talk about this tradition has something we talk about, dreaming, the art of dreaming. And one of the key premises is the art of dreaming is the art of attention. And so dreaming is a very active process of how do we engage our attention. And if our attention is going to fear, then we could be doing something that you could even call nightmaring. We're not really dreaming. If it's all fear, 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 you read the news and you're seeing all these things that can create anxiety. What happens to the nervous system? We get into we can get into sympathetic overstimulation, overstimulation of that aspect of the autonomic nervous system. What happens to our gut if we're really focused on fear all the time? Well, the gut gets tight. We'll tighten up. We'll start to get into these very defensive postures and positions. And the premise of this lineage is that what you embody is also directly related to what you perceive. So if I'm doing this and I'm getting into fear, and it could be a subtle version, then I'm not really able to access the heart very easily. I mean, you could see just on a physical level, we're cutting off the link between the gut that has this, all this gut feeling, gut sense, this, and okay, forget about the heart when you're in that position. So if I can just literally on a physical level lift the sternum, get connected, if I'm sitting in the sitting position where it's easier to crunch down and disconnect, okay, how can I be in this position that we spend so much time in our day-to-day and allow that flow of this kind of older intelligence of the gut, an older nervous system, and the rest of my being, including the heart. Then I can start to relate. So the state of the world, the world it's a really big thing, but we can talk about one aspect is maybe we emphasize the fear too much, and we could emphasize love, we could emphasize joy, we could emphasize learning, we could emphasize sharing. There's so much more. We have, that's, Carlos Castaneda wrote about the art of dreaming, and the culmination of that description, he's coming to love is the highest form of intelligence. It's Carol Teagues that's saying that, his colleague. Don Juan taught him to move with fear. Fear is what really gets the student to be motivated and to move and to shift and to change and to stay on the path. And she is saying, I dare to disagree, that there's love is greater than fear. And so that gets into what do we mean by love. I mean,
we'll get there, but is that also a male-female dynamic? I mean, does a male need to be kind of dealt with a little bit differently than a woman would on that route towards awareness?
Yeah, well, there may be some tendencies. What really, and that gets into my journey with this, male, female, what is a male, what is a female, and it's really up right now in the collective awareness, what is a man, what is a woman. Definitely there'd be some differences with different students and the way they were taught in this lineage. Whether that's strictly male-female I'm not totally sure about that. It would definitely be part of Carlos's experience that he's coming in with. He came in with a lot of, that kind of warrior mood to begin with. It's, and you could say that's a male construct, but there are for sure women that will come in, start on the path of knowledge, and it's going to be much, combat based for them too. Maybe the issues are different slightly, but it's really, I think, more an evolution of human beings, into away from fear, into love. Some people would call that, we're embracing the feminine. The way we were taught gender is a spectrum, and what's masculine and feminine, if we get black and white about it, we're out of perception pretty quickly, and we're starting to get back into a priori, males are this way, females are this way. There are certain features, and does that give one an edge over another? Not necessarily, really. They both have gifts and challenges within those energetic features that women have and men have. So we could get into that.
Physicality also affects that, does it not? I mean, our organs are different. Well, certain organs.
And for this lineage, the womb is the organ of direct perception. It's the organ of dreaming. Women have this built-in biological organ. The biological function. Carlos would talk about primary purpose, secondary purpose. Primary purpose, we're giving birth, and that can be looked at as dreaming a child. There's a lot of intention that goes into giving birth, if we're doing that consciously. And then the secondary function would be seeing new possibilities, dreaming new dreams, seeing new ways of being, new ways of interacting, new solutions. Is that quality and is that trait exclusive to females? No. But they have a natural ability. What my teachers talked about, yes, women have a natural ability, and they have to overcome this trait of taking it for granted.
Right.
And my experience is I will meet, we've been doing seminars since 1993 now, meet a lot of people, a lot of questions, and I will have men come up and tell me about a dream, and they're very excited, and they have super detail about the dream, and they're so fresh, and I'm thinking, that's amazing, that was your dream last night. And they said, no, that was 10 years ago. They didn't take it for granted. So it may have been 10 years ago. At the same time, they're really studying it and doing something with it. That takes us, female might just be like, meh, So we have to overcome that. And Carlo said that's not innate. That sort of meh is not at all innate. It's been learned,
Right.
and it's been socialized. So that's what we have to overcome, is that learned indifference. But there's a possibility. And then the male has, the one word is that they have this steady, step by step. They're going to cone toward knowledge. They're going to take the step and the step and the step, and they're going to. The female is going to go this way. She's ranging at things. We all have male and female inside as well. There are certain places, men and women, different people will do it differently, go about things differently, different training, different predilection. So that's really what we're really looking for, is to integrate that steadiness and that openness for all of us. And we can all connect with that direct perception. We connect with the earth. That's a big mother that we're all connected with. So the men, they want to go direct. There's one way right there, your feet on the ground, instant connection as well. One of my start on this path, really one key turning point, was when I met Florinda Donner Grau at the Sisterhood bookstore. And I'd seen her 2 days before at the Phoenix bookstore, and then I saw her at the Sisterhood bookstore, and it is very symbolic. And she was looking at the female has this natural capacity for evolution. When you find new solutions, that's evolution, isn't it? And the seers of that line talked about, when they talk about the evolutionary power of the womb, it's that ability to intend something new, And one possibility they look at is, what if the dinosaurs intended wings? And that's how birds came into existence. And humans can intend all sorts of things. We have a challenge if the women, the beings with wombs, where's their attention going? And when Florinda was giving this talk at the Sisterhood bookstore, she was talking about the Lysistrata, the play by Aristophanes. And she said that that's the play where the Spartan women say, all right, you men want to go to war, fine, but we're not going to sleep with you. And that's supposed to be a comedy. It's supposed to be a joke. And Florinda said, yeah, maybe it's funny, but it's not really a joke, because the women, up to, for a very long time, were giving all their vital energy. She would say, it's going to John. Does John look at me? Did John call me? Does John like my outfit? Right. And there's certainly a place to interplay, right? I mean, we don't have a species if we don't have a beautiful interaction between male and female, but we need a balance, and we need to let the female voice be present just on its not on its own. It's not going to work isolated. Neither gender is going to work in isolation, right? If we're all just steady eddies and there's no innovation, we're not going to get anywhere. And if there's only, look at that new thing, and look at that new thing, and look at that new thing, and no development, we're not getting anywhere either. Right. And again, all of us have both of those
qualities,
tendencies.
So let's go back to something first you said, which is about fear. And it's there's kind of an order to my question, just because it seems to me that conflict seems to be everything. The first question always leads to that we're a conflicted being. Internally, which is reflected in our external world, obviously. Now, what I always ask as well is do you see does your tradition say that conflict is actually a part of our evolutionary process? Is that a necessary part of our growth?
I think the whole point is learning. So however we're going to get there, and sometimes it seems to be through struggle. Is that necessary? No, it's not necessary. I don't know anybody who's lived without any struggles. There is an inner struggle, and I think that inner struggle has to do with what, we're trying to limit that vastness that's wanting to go through us, and that awareness that is seeing the world through our eyes and the other person's eyes and the tree's eyes and the animal's eyes and the planet's eyes, and the planet is sentient. And it's not, through their senses, through their perception. If we're trying to narrow it down, that is going to create a conflict. And that's inevitable because there's some part of us that's always, at some point in our lives, if not several times, it's going to crash.
And we live
it's not going to work because that expansion is going to be bigger than this little thing, and it's not going to wait for us at some point. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does for sure. And it seems like within that the void that you're talking about, perhaps, we live in this bubble of polarity. And do we require to experience the heights of joy? Do we have to experience the heights of the lows of pain? In other words, is it that polarity and that contrast that really allows us to understand what possibility is for expansion, basically?
It seems to be that, some people call it contrast.
Right. Yeah, there's all sorts
that
of...
That is how we sometimes choose. It's also, if you're looking at awareness and aligning with the greater consciousness that you have, which this lineage would call the energy body or the energy being, if you are disconnected from that, that can teach you also, okay, that pain that you're going to feel will make you even be more determined. And sometimes for some of us, that's what's necessary. Some people have to hit the wall. And Carlos would say, sometimes you have an advantage if you've really, it hasn't worked for you. You come to a point in your life and there's failure. Failure is a great teacher. Does it mean that we consciously aim for failure? Of course not. He's like, hey, let's aim to succeed. Why not? But whether you succeed or you fail, you learn. You be humbled, by the success or be enhanced by the defeat. That's what was so inspiring to hear, Marianne Williams talking about what she learned in a political campaign. So sometimes he would say he'd meet a lot of people, and the people that had really maybe hit the wall, there could be an advantage. Sometimes that's not enough either to stop us from the momentum of the small me, the fear. They're out to get me. They're not acknowledging me or whatever, one's particular brand is. Sometimes that is the great shift. It's like, hey, this really didn't work. I tried it my way. It didn't work. So then you're a little more open, or maybe a lot more open, depending, on the awareness, the experience. The willingness.
The small me, is that what Don Juan or Carlos would have described as the flyers? Is everything that we experience just an influence of the infinite on us? Would you say that we're all fractals of that very thing that we're talking about?
When you say fractals, we are extensions of that, and I also like to look at it as holographic. That we maybe we don't contain all parts of it, but we're connected to all of it.
Right.
And so Carlos debated about whether to really publish about what, Don Juan called the flyers or the voladores. That's an external, those are inorganic beings, meaning they don't have a physical body, physical form, but they have awareness. So they're these, and he would say, they'll feed on our awareness. If we're not using it, then they'll, feed on us, and that can create a lot of fear. That's the challenge, and be counterproductive. So we could go back into the fear. Oh my gosh, it's this huge enemy that I can't even see. And the real point was, he would say the deterrent to those beings is what he would call discipline. And discipline for him and for Don Juan, for our teachers, he described as the art of feeling awe. So it's maintaining that wonder, that openness, that aliveness, no matter what is coming. And that sounds really wonderful. And then when you want to put that into practice, we come into, I would have been fine, but Sarah wouldn't listen to my idea, or my neighbor was making noise and I couldn't really, rest, or you name it. And we could try to get ultra sophisticated and blame stuff on the flyers. Well, those terrible flyers, or the politicians, it's really easy to kind of complain. Right. So we could even take it to that level and just say, well, we've got these predators. I mean, and he would say, well, I'm only human. That's what we want. We're human, which is, wow, there's a lot of possibilities in this form. There's a lot of strength. There's a lot of resourcefulness. We have this energy being. We can travel anywhere in terms of our awareness. We can really access knowledge of all sorts through space and time. They're just for starters. And so which part of the human are you going to focus on? So for him, it's in a way, okay, noted. Let's note it. Throughout history, we've had this external mind that doesn't really care too much about this planet, for example. It's not from here. He would say one size fits all. It's sort of garden variety. I don't even want to say that because gardens are wonderful, but it's just really, one size fits all self-absorption, and right. Which is not the same as healthy self-care, right? It's that continuously going back to the fear of something's going to happen to me. I'm not going to have enough money. I'm not going to be good looking enough. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too big. I'm too small. And that is food. They don't control, any. But it still goes back to those external forces are not really the deciders. We are. Right. So if we don't indulge that, shift your focus somewhere. Take a breath. Exhale. First, before you take the breath, release a breath. And then you can get some fresh new air, some inspiration. You can go back to that state of wonder, of awe. And it's not necessarily a state of spacing out and there's, don't bother me, I'm in awe. Right. No, but it's just the absolute beauty and precision of everything that's coming our way. It's really a mirror to our vibration. So, he said that if you get past that particular predator, there's other more sophisticated ones waiting. So we can even have humor about that ultimately. It's like, look, can we be accountable for how we show up for things? Did I show up kind of helter-skelter and everybody else had to help me get there and then they didn't really do a good enough job? Or did I dream it? Did I know there's certain things I need to do, or rest, nurture, those types of things. Did I show up connected? Humans are waking up also. It's becoming more extreme. Some people are getting past that program of let's be in fear and blame and all that. There's a rising consensus to go away from it and get out of that. But what's also important to emphasize is that that's not by any means the only kind of inorganic being out there. And that's going right back into the fear, is to just project onto things that are unseen in the daily world that, they're all scary. That's coming from us, really. Right. It's coming from some of the choices that we make, and it's not to be blaming ourselves either, but we have the power really to step out of that, to exhale and let something else come in.
Would you say that there is a universal intelligence or a grand design?
There's definitely a universal intelligence that underlies everything we do. They call it, it's many names for it in this lineage. One is the intent of infinity, something that connects to everything in the universe, and it's expanding. So the universe, infinity is not, we call it infinity, but it's not complete. It's as we expand our awareness, we meaning sentient beings, organic and inorganic, really, if we want to go there, it expands. so we're extensions of it, and um, the that might seem to be a question of belief, but for this lineage, it's a question of practicality. Carlos would say, "Don't take my word; find out for yourself. See what happens if you consciously call intent, and notice what comes. What comes." And it's astounding for me. And it can be something really simple. It can be the parking space or the birthday gift for your niece or your nephew. That, okay, I'm going to pause, take a breath. I really want to find the perfect or something that will really speak to their heart, and get out of the way. And then you'll get an impulse. We'll call your sister. She knows what they want. Or go over here. Go to that library there. Or you'll find, you'll start getting impulses. Or someone will just call you up and start talking about this science kit that you didn't know about. Just something that simple. Where's that coming from? For this tradition, it's you connected your energy body, which is like another. You have a luminous sphere that surrounds and goes through this body, and then you have another smaller, compact one they call the energy body. And that energy body, it's a great scout. You can, go ahead and find things for if you ask, because it can connect to everything else. So it can connect to that greater intelligence directly.
What are the steps for a person that's not got someone to tap them on their shoulder and to move their sandwich point to see it all in an instant? What's the steps from your point of view to get that all in alignment, to get the energy body working?
It's interesting that you mentioned the tap on the back, because especially when we first started teaching workshops, people would say, "Hey, but you have someone to tap you on the back," and actually we didn't. Carlos did, but that was Don Juan's time, and it was his way. He was like, "I don't have that much time. I don't know how much time exactly I have, but I don't have too much," and he had to kind of put the knowledge of his whole lineage into these students in a short time. And he said the lineage ended with them. There's no, leader and party, and someone's going to tap you on the back. They decided to just open it out, and the keys that they brought out are the practices, the tensegrity practices, like the magical passes as one. Those are designed to help us first and foremost shift the breath. Again, it goes back to the breath. Our orientation to the world is really tied into our breath. And if we're bracing in fear, we're not breathing very well, of course. And so that's a first step. Can you practice? It helps tune your energy fields. It also helps to just get the lymph flowing in the body. We don't have, we have all this water flow that should be happening, but a lot of times we've stopped it because we're sitting, or we're maybe eating things that for us personally don't really jibe, or we're thinking kind of stagnant thoughts. This is one unit. It's not separate. What we think is what we embody, really. And so they go together. So if we can shift, we'll have practices of you're mapping the body and waking up these centers that are physical centers, but they also correspond to energetic nexuses that get the energy flowing in the whole body, in the whole luminous body. That opens us up. Now the energy is more available for some other possibilities rather than fighting other people, thinking that if I could just win my battle against, John or Susan, I'm going to be free. It's not really where the battle is, so we can get into that. But that's where the practice they call the recapitulation or the life review comes in. Okay, now I have a little energy. What am I going to do with it? A little more energy means I could have a little more concentration on what I'm doing in day to day. And it starts with what I'm embodying. How do I physically enter the scene? Am I shuffling in? And, if I come to the meeting, that's energetically, this is conflict right here. Somebody else is talking, it's like, we're in battle already, and that's really a waste of energy. We're misaligned. It's, you hear those stories about judgment. We're judging the other person, and it's like, who is it really affecting? It's ultimately affecting our alignment, our dreams, our ability to be of service, to live a higher purpose. So those practices, the tensegrity movement, the self-review, silence, those two can also help you get into silence. Dreaming, which means that we're looking for openings in our conscious waking awareness, and also at night when we go to sleep. How do we enter sleep? Can we do it in a way that we can actually recognize I'm dreaming? So these dogs that are chasing me, I could turn and just let them know, back off, or this really interesting text that I'm reading, maybe I'll write it down when I wake up, because we always think we're going to remember, but if we're conscious that we're dreaming, you might pay extra attention, and you have a better chance to remember, or it's endless. But those are the main practices. Decision is another part, and that's what Carlo said. He said, it's not in my nature, it's not the way he did things to push your back and move your point of orientation. Right. He's like, it's your decision. You have to decide that's what you want to shift, and these practices, you can do it, and you consistently over time a little bit. Also, we have the opportunity to practice together. That creates shifts that weren't available in prior times through that means. So they had to maybe do other things, but it was a hermetic, it was secretive. It was a secret tradition. So you didn't have large groups of people practicing together. You didn't have a seminar with several hundred people looking at their life, a specific aspect of their life together. And so another practice that ties all those together is something that he called theater of infinity. It's something that evolved through the lineage. Especially there was in the wall Julian, who was an actor before he got involved with this lineage. Nawal meaning somebody who has a direct contact with the energy body and who has taken up this training, this seer's training, these practices. So theater of infinity ties it all together, where we're looking at what part am I playing? And maybe there's certain roles that we maybe repeat, one or two roles, and really our nature as human beings, our capabilities are playing many, many parts in our lives. So, I have specific parts that I will play. We could get into that, or we could get into that later. Over time I get to learn, that's really repetitive. And I'll go to battle to keep trying to play that part, and it's not taking me anywhere. That's what we would call the theater of the finite. I'm going to repeat, and it's really different expressions of fear. Right. So in my case, the example would be, Carlos would say early on, we would be meeting to practice tensegrity at a studio together, he and his female colleagues and his students. And he would tell the whole room, Nyei thinks she's a genius. And I said, why is he saying this? I don't think I'm a genius. Einstein is a genius. Why is he saying that? I never said I was a genius. And I thought, well, it's just my task somehow to not react to it, not get into it. No, if I really look at it over and it's funny now. I didn't think it was funny then, okay? It's funny now, but it's not totally, gone. I have to be vigilant. But what if I really look at what I carried into the room, I expected to be listened to. And I expected people, and I really thought I was right. And I had pretty much zero doubt in any topic that you bring to me. I could quickly grasp it and have an opinion on it. And that is ultimately, if the goal is expanded awareness, it's an insane stance, you know? So this part of the genius has certain physical postures that go with it. It has certain breath patterns. It has certain inner dialogue that goes with it. And you know, when it came time for me to step out of that role, like in order to function day to day, I almost couldn't function. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how ingrained it was. And there's been stages of that over time. There's still, you know, days I'm like, well, why doesn't she want to hear my insight? Right. Because that's not the part to play today. The part would be maybe let's expand the repertoire. You know, a really great actor will be able to play different parts. So what about the part of enhancing someone else's idea? And in my case, especially another woman's idea. We're back to the sisterhood bookstore. So that's something, that's a theater of infinity. My old role would be to be kind of overtly or covertly really edging one way or another that I'm going to get whoever I think is the dominant male in the room. I'm going to be number one. I'm going to get their attention one way or another. And for me, it was through verbal stuff. I learned to read early, and that's what he said. She thinks she's a genius because she could read when she got to first grade. And I thought, oh, he exaggerates. He didn't. Right. He didn't. And he has a great sense of humor. He wasn't running me down, and he didn't do that. That was not, he wasn't running me down. He just really, if he took you on and he wanted to help you, that he couldn't do a push in the back, but he could reflect to you. Right. You know, he cared enough in that sense to give it a go. Let me give that reflection. It was a real quandary for me because, you know, this is somebody in front of you that by the time I met him, he's a very seasoned, very conscious being. He had more energy than anybody around him. You know, I don't know how old he was or wasn't, and I really don't care. You know, it's not my concern, but he had a ton of energy. He was working on several books. He did, you know, there were 3 books that came out in the last year of his life. I worked with him on those books, and he had a whole garden that he cultivated. He had all people that he was. He didn't call himself a teacher, but for want of a better word, we'll say students. He who knows what else? Okay, I'm just sort of saying. So, and he did it all impeccably with great enjoyment, great flair, great precision. And he would always tell us that too, to have a ball, have a ball. You know, we're going to a seminar and we're teaching for the first time, or it always seemed like the first time because there's always something, whatever the topic is. Yeah, and he would say, have a ball, just enjoy yourself, pink. And he did. So how can we do that? It's just a little step at a time. Being aware, practice some breathing, exhale longer than the inhale, do some breathing magical passes, or tensegrity movement is another name for them, that name inspired by Buckminster Fuller. Look at where we're engaging, it's that tension, which means engagement and release in the body. The movements have you do that. You're engaging and then releasing, and then if you do it enough, the idea is that that's going to transfer to your day-to-day life where you're not going to just try to be on. So that tension and release is what creates the energetic integrity, rather than I'm just going to be engaging, or I'm just going to be totally extreme and be off and not disengaged. No, it's that interplay of exhale, inhale, listen, respond.
So is it that contraction that gives you your first clue that you're reacting in a way that's the little self?
You know, sometimes it's the contraction. Sometimes I'm not going to be that alert, and I'm going to start getting into a story of how somebody is pressing me, and they are my petty tyrant, which is a great term, the petty tyrant who, that's the term that, Don Juan talked to Carlos about, somebody in your life who drives you to distraction.
Right.
And that's a really good description, because they'll drive you to distraction from your purpose, from your alignment, from your joy. So the fun part is that, if I start having a story like that, then I get to know, okay, let me check my breath. It's okay. Hopefully I'll exhale pretty soon. Sometimes I want to just keep going, and I want to tell somebody else, no, but look at what he's doing, or she, or them, and then hopefully you catch that somewhere in one of those elements. The dialogue might be what you notice, where you start going into, it's just, there's no point, who's getting misaligned. It's a lot of times it's this first,
right,
and then that'll pull the rest of this with it. What Carlos was looking for with tensegrity is that we are going the other direction, that if there's one part of us that starts to wander, that integrity of our practice, meaning our presence, our awe, will pull that back into line. So if I'm present, then I'll start going, oh, I've been, quietly, maybe for an hour or for a month or for a decade, judging somebody on something. Sooner or later, I need to recognize that's really about me. They may or may not be doing whatever it is I think they're doing, but for sure it's something that's a blind spot for me if it's driving me to distraction. Why am I so obsessed with that? Because it's my unseen part. So they gave me a gift ultimately, that they pushed me to drive me to consciousness.
From my impression from the books, is that Don Juan achieved third attention, whereas and Carlos being the putting the golden clasp on that lineage was to reveal it all to the world. So, like you say, that kind of secretive nature that they sort of sprung from due to the time that they lived in and came from. It seems that this is a time now for everything to be out in the open. Would you agree that that's what you've taken this lineage to?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and it comes right to the theme of this whole series, is the state of the world. And Carlos, Florinda, Donna, Taisha Ablar, Carol Teagues, and his colleagues, who are my teachers and the teachers of my colleagues. They were all, in different ways, made the statement that this is not the time for secrecy. Look, the clock is ticking. Carlos would talk about it's 11:45, and then he would say, it's 5 minutes to 12. There was one time where he would talk about other species are evolving faster than we are. It's not the time for secrecy. It's the time for openness, and if we have some tools that can help humanity, by all means. That was their gift, their gesture, is to bring it out. And so that's how the development of tensegrity came about. Carol Teagues was talking, looking with Carlos and saying, we got to bring out the movements, because people would go and listen to lecture and find it maybe enchanting or exciting or interesting, but no, didn't seem to give them a ground to integrate a new perspective into their daily life. So they find, okay, let's see if movement shifts people. Movement, just moving, we can get into movement and overdo that too. The mind can take that on and let's move till we drop, and I'm going to kick higher than you, and miss the point again. So they take that risk. That's part of what they saw when they brought it out is, okay, but then some people are just going to get fixated on that. But maybe some people catch a little more energy and start to take on the self-awareness that it gives you the chance to do. And it's an awareness of, on a moment-to-moment basis, like you asked, are there moments where you become aware, you've shifted, into a position that's going to be fear-based, the theater of the finite instead of the theater of the infinite. And that's what all this is meant to cultivate, is an awareness, and it's an embodied awareness. It's, Carlos would say, it's not really going to work for us if we pretend that we're just trying to be up here or here. That needs to be connected with here, and maybe the spokesperson for this rather than the other way around. Or so.